Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. It's hard to believe that you can get back at someone with just 8.5 pounds, but trust me, the end result will surprise you. Here we go. My 8.5-pound revenge on my cheating, thieving ex. When I was at uni, I started dating this guy. At first, he was wonderful, dedicated to his studies, fun to be around, attentive, and always surprising me with things, working hard at his job, etc. Then, bit by bit, things unraveled. He started skipping classes, then he barely bothered to go at all. Worse still, he never helped around the house, never washed up, cleaned up, did laundry, nothing. He was even fired from his job for too many no-shows. All he wanted to do was sit at home and play Xbox or browse the message boards and forums. This was in the days before social media, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. This left me having to pick up extra shifts, sometimes double and triple shifts, all while going to class and studying. I later learned that this was a pattern for him. He'd be really dedicated to whatever he set his heart on, but then get bored and fall back into old bad habits. Then he'd find a new passion and rinse and repeat. I knew I should have ended the relationship much sooner, but I held out hope that he would snap out of it, that maybe it was just exam stress getting to him. I desperately wanted things to go back to how they were, but it wasn't meant to be. I caught him cheating and threw him out. I was so stressed with everything that it wasn't until the next day that our joint savings account crossed my mind. There was a little over $5,000 in there, and bar a few hundred from him. The rest was money I'd saved. I checked the account, and it was all gone. My ex had cleaned out the account and moved into a new flat with a side chick. I called the bank. There was nothing they could do. He was authorized on the account. I contacted the police. They told me there was nothing they could do since it was a joint account, so nothing criminal had happened. They suggested taking it to civil court, but said I'd probably spend more money than I got back in legal fees, so it likely wasn't worth it. My ex had stolen $5,000, and there was nothing I could do about it. I felt like such an idiot. I got even angrier when I saw his posts on various forums boasting about his new game consoles, new games, new TVs, and gadgets, all bought with my money. I'm not usually a vengeful person. Petty on occasion, sure, but I've never wanted to exact revenge as much as I did right then, and I knew just how to do it. While I was a student, I temped every summer to help pay for my studies. One such job had been for a debt collection agency. The work was as crappy as you can imagine, but it paid really well, and it was only for a few months. My ex had been dodging debt for many years, and he was very proud of the fact. He was also proud of the fact that his debt was close to being statute barred, and he hadn't paid a penny. For those of you who don't know, in the UK, creditors have about 6 years to collect a debt, and then it becomes statute barred. That means the money's still owed, but creditors have no legal way to enforce payment, such as using bailiffs. My ex was a few months away from reaching statute barred status. However, what a lot of people don't know is that making a payment on that debt resets the clock. If you pay any amount, then that 6 years starts from scratch. Previously, I'd used my insider knowledge to help him dodge the debt. Now I would use it to hit him where it hurt. By the end of our relationship, I was handling everything, including his debts. I had the paperwork, so I knew who he owed and how much. I called his creditors up. I was honest and said I was a friend calling to make a payment on his behalf. I didn't pretend to be him because that would be a big legal no-no. They weren't allowed to disclose any details, but they were able to take a payment. I paid the minimum I could on each debt, about £1 on most, but had one with a minimum payment of £1.50. It was the best 8.5 pounds I've ever spent. I also made sure to give them his new address and contact details, as well as his parents' address. Having worked in the biz, I knew they wouldn't change the address since I wasn't the account holder, but they would note it. They had various systems where they could search for his name against that address and see if anything came up. If they got a hit, they'd change the address. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait. A few months rolled by, then it happened. His posts on the forum went from boasting about his new gaming PC to panic about a court date. He called me and begged for advice. I told him to F off. Seeing I wouldn't help, he asked for advice in the forums. One of his online friends told him not to turn up in court, that way they wouldn't be able to prosecute without him there. It was terrible advice that was 100% untrue. In fact, not showing up is one of the worst things you can do, especially in civil court. This was getting better and better. The court date came and went. My ex naturally didn't go. A few weeks later, my ex posted photos of his empty flat. Bailiffs had cleaned him out and taken every last one of his shiny new gadgets and toys. On top of that, he ended up with several CCJs, county court judgments. These are a big deal and can seriously damage your credit history, making it hard to get bank accounts outside of basic ones, near impossible to get credit, including getting a mortgage, and it can also make it hard to rent a place since many landlords don't like renting to people with CCJs as they're considered high risk. He also won't be able to find jobs in the financial sector. Now that he was broke and didn't have nice things, his side chick left him. I never got my $5K back, but it felt good to see everything he bought with his ill-gotten gains taken away. Hope that $5K was worth it. For anyone wondering how a student accrued 6 years of debt, he started at the university I attended when he was 25. He had initially gone to a different university at 18, but dropped out at 19 and went into the world of work. Then he convinced his parents to fund a business degree. He wanted to become an entrepreneur. And our next story. You want me to read the lease? If you say so. Backstory. I moved to the Big Apple in April from LA and signed a lease for an apartment sight unseen. It was the same price as my LA apartment, but while in LA $1,350 gets you a master bedroom with a walk-in closet, private bath, and 3 roommates, in New York City for $1,350, they've turned my closet into the bathroom, and I now weigh 135 pounds thanks to the 7 flights of stairs that I had to walk up every day. Some days I'd raise my arms to put on deodorant and scrape my elbow on the ceiling. One of my 5 roommates was an RN though, so there was the upside. The only saving grace was that this apartment was pet-friendly and had an in-unit washer and dryer. I hated living there, and after 2 months when my job said I could work remotely, I packed up and went to the Caribbean. While I was there, I won the New York City housing lottery. For the first time in my life, I could afford to live by myself in New York City of all places. I'd read in forums that landlords are usually pretty happy for tenants when they win and let you out of your lease no problem. Present. So in my optimism, I sent the management company an email letting them know that I won the lottery and wanted to discuss terminating my lease early. They told me to speak to the brokerage to get my room filled. The brokerage told me that I would need to pay a broker's fee of $1,350 and still pay rent until they filled the unit, or I could try to fill it myself. I find a guy who was already applying with the broker for another unit, and he wants my room. Then management says they want the guy, I found out, to pay $1,400. This is genuinely the worst apartment that I've lived in. I don't feel right trying to get someone to pay $1,400 for this room. I'm in a bit of a time crunch as new guy wants to move in August 1st, so I need to hire movers to take my stuff to storage the next day. But if I don't get the approval from management that everything is good to go on their end, then there's no point. So I need management to agree to let this guy take over my lease for the price that's on my lease. I argue that a new price would be a new lease, and if they want to do that, they would have to release me from the lease and market the apartment at this new price point. They refuse, saying that I should pay the broker's fee or forfeit my deposit and continue to pay rent until they get my room rented. I'm upset because management basically wants to make more money and assume no risk. I would end up paying until they rent out the awful room to someone. I tell them this is unfair and makes no sense. Then management tells me, well, there's no lease takeover in the lease. I'm confused because I vaguely remember reading something about a $500 fee for a lease takeover. Read your lease. We were doing you a favor before, but now we're only going by the lease, management tells me. So I find my lease because I remember there being this $500 clause. I never found the $500 clause because written on the first page of the lease was Clause 2, length of lease. The term, that means length, of this lease is beginning on 2/1/2022 and ending on 8/31/2022. I'm elated. My move-in date for my new place is 8/25/2022, so I no longer need to rush. All because management told me to read my lease. I give them back a call and request the email address to send my 30-day notice of intent to vacate, or if it should be mailed as it's not specified in the lease. Management tells me that I can't break the lease. I tell them I'm not. It ends next month. I send them a photo of the first page of the lease. He sputters and says, "You know it's a year-long lease. This is a typo." As you know, I just took over managing the building and I inherited some bad leases. I didn't know this, but I gleefully respond, well, I was doing you a favor before, but now I can only go by the lease. If the lease says my term ends next month, I have to honor that. He hangs up, furious that this is happening. At this point, I'm no longer concerned about hiring movers, so when he calls me back at 8 p.m., I'm ready to tell him the cutoff for the movers was 4 p.m. and that I'll move out according to lease, but he starts the conversation in a somber, defeated voice. You can move out on the 31st. We just have to go according to the lease. We'll do the final walkthrough and give you back your deposit. As I'm still in the Caribbean, my cousin will be subletting for August, and I'll be moving into my new apartment when I get back. Everything worked out in the end because I read my lease. And our last story. We are so poor. Sell your grandpa's house. I need the money. My grandfather was a kind and loving man with a special place in his heart for his family. He had a platinum signet ring that he treasured, a gift from his late wife, which he wore every day as a reminder of their love. My aunt's family, on the other hand, had a different approach to life. They preferred to rely on rude and deceit rather than work, and often bragged about their shenanigans to get more money. They rarely visited my grandfather and never showed much interest in his life or his well-being. One day, my grandfather suffered a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital. My mother, sister, and I went to care for him, and after a few days, my aunt and her family showed up as well. Although they'd not been close with my grandfather, they expressed their concern and wanted to spend time with him. Sadly, my grandfather passed away a day later, leaving us all heartbroken. We made arrangements for his funeral and decided to bury him next to my grandmother. My aunt's family declined to attend and refused to contribute to the cost of the funeral. However, we respected their decision and did not hold it against them. After the funeral, we returned to my grandfather's house only to find that some of his valuable possessions were missing. It was a shock to all of us, and we suspected that someone had stolen them. Everything of value was gone, and the only thing left was some pillows from my grandmother. We were furious. We went to Karen and she denied everything. We had nothing on her at the time, so we decided to file a police report and left it at that. Until a month later, when we went to visit and see if everyone was coping. The first thing Karen said to my mother, "What about the inheritance? I want to sell the old man's house and divide the money." Not a great greeting, but it got worse. My mom noticed some expensive new things Karen had, a new Gucci bag and a car, and she started to suspect something, until I saw my grandfather's G signet ring on her desk. I asked her where she got it, and she told me she bought it with the money Karen found on the road recently. Sounds convincing. We went to the car, and on the way, Karen yelled, "What about the inheritance? You don't need the house and the land. We're poor. Give it to us." We get in the car, and we're all furious. It's a good thing I had a picture of my grandfather where you could see this signet ring on his hand. I called the number the officers left me. Soon, Karen will get what she deserves. When the trial's over, I'll let you know the details if you're interested. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.